Hello, everybody, and welcome to the return of the Knicks Film School pregame show. My name is Andrew Claudio, aka GMAC, and it is time to preview the Knicks' next upcoming matchup. Apologies that we didn't do any during the preseason. You can blame the fact that I don't care about the preseason and the fact that my baseball team decided that they wanted to extend their season significantly longer than I thought they would. But with the Mets now eliminated, and as far as I'm concerned, baseball over for the rest of the year, it's time to talk about the Knicks. And what a first matchup to preview. We are watching the Knicks go to ring night. Hopefully they get one for themselves in the not too distant future, but they will head to Boston to play at an arena that I will not be acknowledging as the Garden, but an arena in Boston with the letters T and D over it that will feature the Celtics getting their rings for winning the 2025 NBA championship. And the Knicks will take on the Boston Celtics on the first game in the first moments of the 24-25 NBA season. And you know where I had to go to preview this matchup and to welcome on for my first guest. It's the guy I welcomed on to be my first guest for last season as well. Something about New York versus Boston. Joining me from the How Bout Them Celtics podcast, as well as Celtics blogs and a bunch of other publications as well. Mr. Jack Simone. Jack, how's your summer? How are you doing, my friend?
I'm great. I'm doing great. Happy to be back. I was kind of sitting here in like the month leading up to the season. Like, am I going to get the text? Am I going to get the call up? Am I going to get to be on the pregame show again?
You initiated it this time. You know what? I also I might take you for granted because I was like, of course I'm going to ask Jack.
Always.
It was taking my time. As you heard at the beginning, I didn't care about the preseason. So I figure my process is 4 or 5 days out. I give people like a week's notice.
Perfect.
And then I have the first 3 booked, I'm already started looking next week. I had completely forgotten that the Knicks play the Miami Heat next week. So I get to get those juices pumping and flowing next week. But we're here to talk about Knicks Celtics.
Absolutely.
And the first question I have for you is, were you able to enjoy the summer of the Celtics winning the title, even though all I heard about the Celtics this summer was anything but they won the title between the Olympics and the sale and all the extensions and obviously all the things my basketball team did, and we'll get to that. But how was your summer as a fan, but also as someone who covers the team, defending an NBA title?
So my summer personally was great. I mean, obviously, I think the Celtics went through the ringer a bit more than I did, but I moved. I actually changed websites I'm writing for, so I'm covering the team for Hardwood Houdini now. So
excuse me. Okay.
No. Hey, how would you know, right? But a lot of changes in my world. But the Celtics obviously got put through the ringer a little bit. Jason Tatum became the poster child for hate in the NBA. It feels like Jaylen Brown didn't make Team USA. All I heard was nothing. And my new roommates, by the way, because I moved into the city with some friends, all love to just say, so Jaylen Brown's the best player in the Celtics, right? Like they just love trying to get to me about certain things. It's their favorite activity. But it was so weird to see a summer where, like, I feel like you haven't seen it in a while of the defending champions being like nothing but slandered. And I think it comes from a product of the Celtics last year were just boring. If you don't root for the Celtics, it was a boring NBA season because they were the favorites going in and they did exactly what everyone expected it to do, which was effectively just dominate the rest of the league. And I mean, I've said it, I don't know if I've said it on here, but I've said it on my own podcast. Like, yeah, the Celtics had an easy road to the finals. Obviously, they played 3 injured teams. And then, I mean, the finals, 50% of people picked the Mavs, which I still think was egregious, but it didn't make sense to me, but they rolled through them too. So like, obviously I was thrilled as somebody who covers the team and got to experience it all. I was very happy with the way things played out, but from an outsider who doesn't root for the Celtics, like last year kind of sucked. It just wasn't fun. So I had a good summer personally. The Celtics, Joe Mazzulla has them going into this season with the mindset of, he was asked the other day, he says, I tell them every day that they're not great because the 24-25 Celtics hasn't done anything yet. Like, we're not defending the title. We need to go win a new one. So he's got them in a good place in terms of perspective, but it was definitely a weird summer for a defending champion.
So how do you think that would have gone differently? Would they have had to play like a 6-game series against the Heat, and then like the Cavs pushed them to 6, and then the Knicks all healthy, they beat them in 7, and then you have to beat the Nuggets. Like, does the path dictate why they feel? I mean, you tell me if I'm using the right word. Do they feel disrespected going into this year?
Yeah, it almost felt like the reason everyone picked the Mavs to win the finals is because, like, what's the first healthy team they faced, just disregarding the fact that they had like the biggest lead in the Eastern Conference in 30 years. Like, I understand it, and I get Jason Tatum didn't shoot well in the playoffs. Like, objectively, he shot like awful. Like, there's no way around it, but there's also more to the game than that. He was really important on defense. He was a great playmaker, great rebounder, right? Like, he was doing a bunch of other stuff. But it just felt like there was no Jimmy Butler in the first round. Donovan Mitchell missed time in the second round. Tyrese Halliburton missed time in the third round. In my opinion, the Pacers were the best series they played. I thought the Mavs were the third best team they played in the playoffs. I thought the Cavs and the Pacers played them better. And I think it was just a product of the Celtics were so good and the teams they faced were so injured that people were almost like, oh, it's a fraud championship, which it is what it is. Like, the Celtics aren't going to care about that. They get to raise banner 18 tonight as people are listening to this, and they'll be happy about it. But I think you combine that with Jaylen Brown not making Team USA and Jason Tatum barely playing on Team USA. And I think it's just a, classic. If you don't like the Celtics, you're not a Celtics fan, you don't cover the team, whatever. People are like, they don't like him in general. And so any chance they get to like sort of dump on him a little bit, I think they'll take it. And combine that with the easy path, and it's just kind of a recipe for what you got.
I mean, I already don't like him in the first place, but I feel like I've
exactly.
been able to. I mean, you tell me if outside of the name of the building, I feel like I've tried to be as respectful as possible. I think the most disrespectful thing I think I've said about the Celtics. Let's go through the list. No, I'm kidding. There's one thing that I'm curious about your opinion. This can lead into the next point that I mentioned on the rundown, but like, you acknowledge them as champions. I don't like discounting titles because winning 4 rounds is just a difficult thing to do. So you can add footnotes if you'd like to, but I still like acknowledge they won the title and their path is what they earned as the 1 seed. But I still think I would have picked Denver in a series to beat them. And I don't know how you would have felt. Like, how do you feel that I'm like, yes, they won the title? I still don't think that they would have beaten Denver in a 7-game series, or to someone that thinks that.
I understand it because, I mean, Denver was the only team the Celtics didn't beat in a game last year. Like, they went 0-2. I still think I would have leaned Celtics. I think the masses would have leaned Knicks. I just think in a 7-game...
You mean Nuggets, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, you said Knicks.
I think... Sorry, got distracted.
I think the pod you're on, it's okay.
I looked down. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's the team. I think in a 7-game series, the Celtics would have figured stuff out. And I think they would have defended people a little differently. Like, sort of the way they defended Luka was how they would have defended Jokic. Just like live with that, take away everything else. And I still think the math would have leaned Celtics because of how much talent and how much depth they have. But I'm not going to like sit here and say, oh, you're ridiculous for thinking that. Like, yeah, they're the team that didn't beat the Celtics in the regular season. They're the defending champions for a reason. At the time they were. And so I get it. And I think that'll be a test they have to answer this season as well, if the Nuggets stop cutting rotational pieces for the sake of salary purposes.
Yeah, I'm curious, and I'll there's obviously a question coming up. In fact, I'll just ask it now. The teams that you feel are the biggest threat to dethrone the Celtics. If you want to, now I asked this question last year, and you had a very fascinating answer that the number 1 team to threaten the Celtics from winning the title was the Celtics, like them getting in their own way. And I look around, and I personally wouldn't put the Nuggets in that category. There's obviously a different Western Conference team that got better and may threaten them to do it this year. But, if you understanding the pod you're on, not going to be offended wherever the Knicks fall. But if you had to rank, like, let's go top 4, the 4 teams, and I'm excluding the Celtics from this, so you don't have to say that answer. Like, the 4 teams that are the biggest threat to the Celtics repeating as champs are what? Or I guess are who in this context?
For what it's worth, I do think the Celtics have exercised most of the beating themselves demons. I think Joe Mazzulla's done a good job of that. But the 4 teams, I still think you have to put the Nuggets in there just because of how good Jokic is. Like, I think there is an element to it where having a player that is able to dissect a team the way he does, like there's no other player in the world who could do it like him. Like, even Luka, the Celtics found a way to beat him because they said, go take your mid-range shots and don't play any defense. Good for you. But the fact that Jokic is able to be so effective as a paint protector, like, gives him a little bit of something he can do on the defensive end. So I think the Nuggets would be there. Am I ranking them, or do you want me to name 4?
You got to rank them. Yeah, I'm going to make you
rank them. I'll put the Nuggets 1 just because I think they've played the Celtics so well. I'm gonna put the Knicks actually at 2 just because I give a little more juice to a team in the Eastern Conference because it's more likely they'll play them more, they'll play them in the playoffs earlier and stuff like that. Like it's harder to say a Western Conference team because they got to get through the West first. And I think the Knicks have done a good job of effectively building to guard the Celtics. Like Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby are just probably the best 2 wing defenders to guard Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I do think I was saying this on How About Them Celtics earlier. I'm intrigued to see what like the offensive spacing looks like with Karl-Anthony Towns. I'm intrigued to see how the Celtics go at Jalen Brunson and Towns, who while they're not, I don't think they're necessarily like fall into the category of like bad defenders. They are the worst defenders in that starting 5, the hypothetical starting 5. So like, are they going to run a lot of pick and roll at those 2? Are they going to have, Derek White or Drew Holiday target Jalen Brunson a decent amount, or try to get Tatum switched on, or try to do this, that, and the other thing? And I think that would be accelerated in a playoff series. But in terms of top end talent, I do think the Knicks roster is one of the most well built to compete with a team like the Celtics. Obviously, there's like depth concerns, and I mean, the Knicks only have 12 players in the roster right now, so you got to figure something out. But I do think in general they are built well. I'd put the Thunder at 3 just because they are insane. Like the depth that they have is incredible. I think people give the Thunder and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander a bit too much credit already. I think like Shai's awesome, but like if we spend years saying why is Luka so high in rankings, what has he done yet? If we like why is Tatum so high in rankings, what has he done yet? Like what has Shai done yet? Like he's made it to the second round of the playoffs. He's an incredible player, but like that team is wholly unproven. They are more unproven than Jason Tatum was in his 3rd year in the league. Like I think they're amazing. I think Hartenstein and Caruso are perfect fits, but there is an element to it. Like you got to see it before you buy into them. And so I think they'll be great. I think they'll lead the West and wins in the regular season for sure. But I need to see it in the postseason because I said this in the finals. It is absolutely embarrassing that the West let that Mavs team get to the finals. They were not good. Like that was not a well-built team to make it the playoffs. The Timberwolves should have beat them. The Thunder should have beat them. And a healthy Clippers team should have beat them. It's baffling that the first person to figure out how to guard Luka and Kyrie was Joe Mazzulla because it wasn't that hard. 4th... who's 4th? I don't want to say the Mavs because I think the Celtics are built well to beat them. I don't want to say, you know what I will? I'll say the Timberwolves. I'm going to put the Wolves because I think there are too many injury concerns. I was considering like the Sixers, but the Celtics have a pretty good record against them. I was considering the Bucks because of injury issues. I was considering the Heat because demons. But I think the Timberwolves are actually. I'm going to say the Timberwolves, but I think the Pacers deserve a shot too because they play the Celtics really, really well. But I'll say the Timberwolves because I think their 2 games in the regular season last year were awesome as well. Both went to overtime, I believe. I think Anthony Edwards is a little overrated, but I still think he's a great player. I think they have a great defense, well built. And I think defensively, like the Knicks, they are very well established to beat a team like the Celtics. I think Naz Reid will help them take in a step up this year, and I think DiVincenzo is going to be huge for them too. And I have slowly become a Randall defender, so I do think he'll be a better fit in Minnesota than a lot of people give him credit for. So I'll put the Wolves at 4.
So it's interesting that you just named 3 teams in the West when I talk about teams that could potentially dethrone the Celtics, which tells me that just by process of elimination, you have the Knicks and the Celtics as the clear top 2 in the Eastern Conference. So
I think they're the least questions about those 2 teams. Like, I just think like Middleton's already hurt. Embiid's not playing back to backs. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
So then let me. We talked on a pod that never happened because the audio was garbage, but we recorded a pod in my hotel room in Vegas for Summer League. Yeah. And that was after the Anunoby re-signing and then the Bridges trade. Yeah. And we had talked about the Knicks potentially going small and playing Randall and Anunoby taking turns at the 5 and being able to switch everything. And then the depth that the Knicks are able to turn to with DiVincenzo and Hart and Deuce all coming off the bench next year. And then this cat trade happens. And I'm curious as I bring up the Knicks into this calculation, is the team that you consider the second best team in the Eastern Conference, because I'm also assuming that you have the Celtics as the first best team in the Eastern Conference. Yeah. If they don't make the trade, where do the Knicks fall on that ranking? Did the trade still 2, but like does your percentage of how much basically I'm asking you is how much did the Karl Anthony Towns trade change your perception or how much of a threat the Knicks are, if at all?
I think the Knicks definitely got better in the trade. I think they were better equipped to defend the Celtics with Randall and DiVincenzo, weirdly enough, because I think Cat on the perimeter is going to be like something the Celtics attack a lot. But I think offensively, they are much more well equipped to contend with the Celtics. And at the end of the day, there is just comes a point where you need to score points. Like defense is obviously extremely important, but like I think the jump they took offensively well makes up for what I don't want to say like a step back, but I think in like directly guarding the Celtics, I think there was a little bit of a step back because I think Randall would have been a bit more useful than Cat is on the defensive end in terms of guarding Boston in particular. But I think the Cat trade definitely made them better. I think this is an investment or a belief in like Miles McBride on the bench too. Like I think they really like him. I think he'll need to take a step up. I think they'll need to figure things out with like, do they start Mitchell Robinson and Cat when he comes back and bring somebody else off the bench? Like what does that look like? But I think from an overall team roster perspective, this made the Knicks better. And I do think they have a better chance of beating the Celtics in a series with Cat versus without Cat.
I always love your honesty with that. There's always a defiance on these pods sometimes where I talk to someone like this. You're not going to beat us. There's no chance. And there's always an honest answer out of you. Like last year when I was asking you about the Knicks' chances against the Celtics, and I was honest with you that it wasn't so much that I was projecting the Knicks to beat the Celtics. I just wanted to see it. Like, can I see what this new version of the Knicks looks like against the Celtics? And then we'll go from there, you know? And we never got to see it because Randall got hurt, and we'll never get to see it because the Knicks look completely different now. Look, I go into the season with some questions, some depth questions in particular. Like they're already, I'm back to wondering when Precious Achiuwa is coming back. It's interesting. I went from a depth conversation with you that the Knicks depth is so elite and that's how they're going to be able to have like a great regular season and then we'll see in the playoffs. To one trade, it was almost like a 3-for-1 because Mitch gets taken out of the equation as a result. And yeah, I all that to say, like, I think the Knicks are there's going to be a getting used to you period with this new team, especially since they made the trade right before training camp. And I wonder if with the Knicks also waiting for their center to come back and they're getting used to them, the getting used to you period happening over the next couple of months, combined with Porzingis probably not returning until 2025, did the Knicks trade, in your opinion, almost neutralize any head start they could have potentially gotten on the Celtics, to where if the Celtics got off to not a bad start, but like a not as good as last year's start before Porzingis came back, the Knicks could have potentially built that was my projections. They could have built like a 5-game lead and then try to hold that off to be the 1 seed this year. Am I crazy to even think that's a possibility? Or, you know,
I know what you mean. I don't think the Knicks will have as hard a time gelling as a lot of like new trade pieces do, just because I think the guys they have fit so well in terms of like how they want to play. Like it's going to be Brunson is the almighty ball handler. Like he's always going to have the ball, right? And you have 3 guys in Hart, Anunoby, and Mikal Bridges who are almost exclusively comfortable playing off the ball. We've seen a little bit of Bridges on the ball in Brooklyn, and knowing he can do that, it's going to be helpful next to him. And then Cat, I feel like almost got used to a very off-ball role in the past couple of years with Ant on the rise. And maybe, I mean, I was saying this to Sam earlier this summer, I would love to see Cat take on more of a early years Cat role where he is crashing the glass at a much higher rate. He is getting down low and posting up a lot more, because I think if you do that combined with the floor spacing that he's shown off in recent years, it would open up a whole new category of opportunities for New York. But I do think there is a world where the Knicks could jump off. I don't think my hesitancy to believe that is on the New York side of things, though. I just think the Celtics were really good without KP last year. And everything you're hearing out of practice, everything you're hearing coming out of Joe Mazzulla's mouth is like basically last year doesn't exist. Last year's over. We are not focused on that at all. We don't care. We won the title. We're going to raise the ring and then we're not going to care about it. And I think they're going to be 100% all business. And I think the Celtics should have another really good regular season. I think when I did my predictions, I said like 59-ish wins and I had like 55-ish for the Knicks. So I do think it'll be a lot closer, but I think that is around where I had both of them.
So I have it almost exactly swapped. Like I think I have 58 for the Knicks and 56 for the Celtics.
Sure.
I think they're gonna. I do think these two teams will meet in the conference finals, and then I have no idea what to project at that point. And I know I will sweat out every second of said conference finals if this actually happens.
That'd be the most entertaining. For sure.
I'm all for it. Like we're about to, as much as I hate to admit it, and I will root for a comet to come crashing down. This World Series will be entertaining because it's Yankees Dodgers.
Yeah,
like despite my frustrations about one team that I root for not being there, I can objectively, and I hope people around the country can say objectively, that the most entertaining possible conference finals for the NBA this year is Knicks Celtics.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, from you've mentioned a few times being around the team. Like, have you heard anything about like them discussing what the Knicks have done, or is Mazzulla just that much of a psycho that it's like anything outside of this locker room doesn't matter?
He was actually asked, I mean, I can pull it up. I wrote about it. Joe Mazzulla, when he was asked about the Cat trade, said, I mean, all teams have tried to make roster moves to get better. Carlington Town's a great player. They're a great team. We got to focus on us and we got to get better every day, which is just like
nothing.
Maybe they're discussing it internally. Like, I think obviously they're like, oh, look at this. How do we guard this? How do you do this? I don't think they are. I think Joe Mazzulla has created a culture where they're not afraid of anybody. They don't care about anything else. They're just going to focus on them, focus on how they can beat each individual team and treat this on a night-to-night basis. I mean, when he was asked about the Pascal Siakam trade last year, in the middle of the year, he stopped the reporter mid-question and said, save yourself the rest of the question. I don't care. Like he is brutally honest. I love Joe Mazzulla for it. I think it's refreshing, but I think 100% they have talked about the changes. They've talked about how it changes what they are going to do, but they are never going to express that outwardly.
Interesting. They're the team to chase at this point. The team, I mean, we're all chasing them. They won the title last year, regardless of the path, regardless of the difficulty. They are the team that we're all chasing after. And look, the Olympics aside, I understand that became a lot of drama with Tatum and obviously with Brown not making it. There were two other Celtics there that played important roles. Drew Holiday playing some of the most important minutes of the Olympics. So his contributions, obviously will be important this year. I do have, any curiosities that you or questions you may have. I do have a question about any concerns you have. And like Drew Holiday is like a year younger than me, and I'm old, Jack. So I'm wondering if you have any. Mm-hmm. I mean, what is the biggest concern about the Celtics this year? Is it age? Is it health? Is it like the East getting better? What is it?
I think it's health. I think, like, realistically, last year, as much as KP was hurt and people like just kind of ignored that and said, oh, they were so healthy all year. Like, sure. I do think it is, can everybody in the Celtics stay healthy? Because it's so rare you get as healthy a year as even they had, even with KP. KP's like 50 something plus games. Like, it was a good year for him, right? By his standards. So I think them staying healthy is the most important thing. I think like rotationally, it's like the backup big spots, even though like, I mean, Knicks legend Luke Cornett has been incredible.
Yeah.
Them and Xavier Tillman, who's one of my favorite like people on the planet. I talked to him today for a feature story I'm working on. Like, has looked awesome in the preseason as well. And then like maybe the Drew thing. I think people don't talk about him enough, but like Peyton Pritchard's been awesome like throughout the preseason. So I think it is just staying healthy. And then if the Celtics stay healthy, they should have a chance at beating anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they don't, obviously, but
fair. I get it.
We'll see what happens. From your time around the team, you mentioned the Xavier Tillman story that you're working on. The obviously just the nature of your gig and your job being that you have behind the scenes access. To a Knicks fan that's only paid attention to the Knicks and what the Knicks are doing this preseason, is there anything that might surprise Knicks fans on Tuesday night that they didn't have last year in Boston?
Mm-hmm. I think Tillman is the biggest one. I think Xavier Tillman, like he was obviously there at the latter half of the season, but he has looked unbelievably good in the preseason, and he's playing like the 4 and the 5. So I think you're going to see him in a bunch of different roles. His 3-point shot has looked wildly improved. Like he's letting it fly. They trust him to let it fly. He shot like 50-something% in the preseason, which I know it's the preseason, but like he was taking them in spots where he would also take them in the regular season, like with the starters. So I think that's a big thing. Jason Tatum has a new-ish jump shot. if you really want to count that on the list. It's a little bit quicker. He's not bringing it as low. Like it kind of looked like he was one of those inflatable balloons outside of a car dealership last year. Where he would kind of fling it up there. He doesn't really bring it as low. He just kind of goes right up. The step backs still look the same. So take that for what you will. But he's taking a lot more catch and shoot, which I think is good. And outside of that, I think it's going to be pretty much exactly what you expect.
I think a lot of Knicks fans have there's a PTSD when you talk about someone having a new jump shot.
Yeah, I've seen
Bridges thing. I got to be honest. I've been so deep into playoff baseball that I saw a clip of it. Shout out to DJ Zulo who chronicled it on one of our film sessions, and I just was like, "Wait, what? What is happening? He's shooting what from three in the preseason?" So hopefully that goes away. Stylistically, and this is the X's and O's questions I need to ask you, but so who do you think guards Cat? Do you think I know Drew has taken times guarding centers in the past, and sometimes when the Celtics go zone, he's playing that middle back row. When they're switching everything, I mean, look, with Porzingis, he's in that drop, so that obviously we won't see tomorrow. But you think they'll just switch everything 1 through 5, or do you think primarily you'll see you'll see Drew on a center? Well, I'll just hand it over to you. How do you think they'll guard the Knicks tomorrow night?
Yeah, I think they'll change it up a lot. I think Joe Mazzulla will want to get a feel for things and switch up the way they do. They defend a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me if you see Al on Josh Hart for stretches and Drew on Cat. I think you'll probably see a lot of Al on Cat, just to see how everything else looks, and then maybe you put a Derek White on Josh Hart so he can play, as silly as it sounds. When Rob Williams was here, he played free safety and he came over for blocks, and Derek White is incredible at timing up blocks. So maybe see that a little bit, give him a bit more freedom to roam off the ball, or give Drew Holiday that same freedom because he played that a lot last year. So put either one of those guys on Josh Hart, where Joe Mazzulla has been openly honest about we are okay with certain guys taking threes. And for as on fire as Josh Hart was in the playoffs, that's going to be the guy. It's just going to be the guy.
Jack, hold on. You're speaking to a sensibility and a frustration that is so vocal on Knicks Twitter. The Josh Hart, everybody ignores him, and people being okay with him shooting, which is why there is a movement that Deuce McBride should be the 5th starter over Josh Hart. And I'm not even, Jack, I'm one of them. I'm not as adamant. I'm not as it's against my religion that Deuce McBride isn't starting over Josh Hart. I think they're going to be really good either way. I think Josh Hart at this point in his career is the better player. Deuce McBride being the better shooter might complement what the Knicks are trying to do going 5 out a little bit more. And the numbers with him and Brunson together were just insane last year. So there is a statistical argument for the two of for that being the switch. Plus then Josh Hart gets to be your backup wing, which they don't really have right now with Shamet out. And I mean, really that's it. Landry Shamet is out. And that was their backup wing going into it. So I'm actually, I think we're going to get a front row seat and a great example of just the centers guarding Josh Hart and completely ignoring him on Tuesday night. So, I'm fully prepared for that to happen,
Yeah, I think, I know he shot well last year. I think they might be okay with leaving Miles McBride open and seeing if he's shooting well that night. Because
really?
I just think that's kind of the way the Celtics play. You guard the primary ball handler heavy. You guard whoever you think will shoot well heavy. And then if somebody gets inside, you send a little help and you run out and you get a late contest. And of all those guys on the floor, maybe it'd be Mikal Bridges based on the way his jump shot looks.
Mikal needs to prove he can make shots.
But I think the Celtics don't quote unquote leave people open. They pick who they are most okay with taking a shot and get the late contest on that guy in hopes of stopping a Jalen Brunson drive or stopping an Al Horford, Karl Anthony Towns post up in a mismatch. I reference it all the time, but there was this Pelicans game last year where they just Herb Jones, shoot as many threes as you want, right? Keep shooting. Did it to the Cavs in the playoffs with Kokoro. And there was a game, half of the Pelicans game, he made the threes. In the second half, he didn't. And Joe Mazzulla was after the game. He's yeah, in the first half, the guys we wanted taking shots made them. And in the second half, they didn't. And then we won by 15. They play a math game. And so I think Mikal Bridges, Miles McBride, and Josh Hart are probably just the worst shooters of the bunch. Not that they're bad shooters. Miles McBride, like I said, he shot really well last year. And Mikal Bridges has too. But maybe the most unproven shooter is Miles McBride is the answer there. So I think you might see some we're okay closing out late on some of these guys, and those guys won't be Cat or Brunson or excuse me, OG Anunoby, probably, maybe even him. Like, I think they're going to focus in on Brunson, focus in on Cat, and then play a lot of switch everything and a lot of maybe try to annoy Cat with Drew Holiday.
It's like you said about you can't take everything away, but you could try to take something away. Like, that's what the Knicks' emphasis on rim protection has been over the last couple of years, where they're playing a lot of drop. They're okay. They're going to, like, Tibbs playing the math game that unless a team is shooting 60% from three on a given night, I'm just going to trust that the math will then turn back into my favor. It's why I'm so fascinated how they play this year with these switchy wings and a not really good rim protector in Karl Anthony Towns. Do they switch more often and not put such an emphasis on rim protection and offensive rebounding? And I am very curious if what you're alluding to about leaving Deuce open, because I do believe there's a lot of Knicks fans that believe he's, like, the version we saw of him last year is here to stay, and that he's just getting better, and that him at the 2 next to Brunson is, a sustainable recipe for success.
I like Deuce McBride a lot. I think he's a really good player, and I think that 3-point shooting could be very real. But if I'm Joe Mazzulla, and I obviously I don't know, like, I'm not that in with the team. I cover the team, but I don't know exactly what they're thinking or anything. But if I'm Joe Mazzulla and I'm looking at him, like, I'm not leaving Jalen Brunson open. I'm not going to give OG Anunoby a million open threes. I'm not going to let Cat shoot. So that leaves me with either Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, or Deuce McBride. And if they start McBride over Josh Hart, then that leaves me with Mikal Bridges and Miles McBride. I've seen more of a track record of Mikal Bridges making open threes than Deuce McBride. And so if I'm going to leave anybody and I'm going to have Derek White come off anybody and chase back and try to get a late contest, it will be the guy that is relatively the most unproven. It has nothing to do with, like, oh, I don't think he's going to be a good player. It is, I'm going to play the math game, and the math says that he is the most unproven shooter of the group. So I don't know. Maybe they go to Mikal Bridges because of what they saw in the preseason, but that would just be my guess of maybe this is the guy they trust the most or they want to let shoot the most.
So all of that makes sense from a basketball standpoint, and I think I like to project how I think the reaction's going to be when things happen. Yeah. By what you're telling me, because I believe in Deuce McBride shooting, and I also get frustrated with how teams guard Josh Hart sometimes. Although the Knicks did some good job bringing Josh Hart over as the screener and having him cut, do some back screens. So that way, even if you're ignoring him, he's, like, cutting he's doing back cuts. So that way the whole left side is open. And so, like, it's creating space as a result. So it's a spacing cut. That's what it's called. But the point is, like, the first sub should probably be Deuce McBride for Josh Hart. So
definitely.
we can see it. And you know what the first sub's going to be? Deuce McBride for Mikal Bridges, so Bridges can play with the second unit. And I'm already projecting the frustrations that we didn't see that lineup enough on our post game tomorrow night. So I apologize, Tibbs, in advance for the vitriol you're going to get from a podcast that you will never pay attention to because it's not hosted by Josh Hart or Jalen Brunson. Okay, so last year, as we wrap up this pod, last year we did the Mount Rushmore of rivals. The gimmick this year that I'm going to wrap up every podcast with is the Mount Rushmore of villains. So now that the Knicks are back in the playoffs and establishing some playoff villains, I can tell you now, Joel Embiid made the list last year, arguably front and center after that nonsense he was pulling off in the playoffs last year. But I'm curious, lifelong Celtics fan, obviously now someone covering the Celtics, a bit of a Celtics historian yourself. Who are the top 4 most hated sports figures to the Celtics fan base?
Oh, man. Do you want all time or do you want, like, my recent bubble history?
Do both. Okay. You're 20, what? 27, 28? Or 25. So you give me your perspective. Because I appreciate that, the younger perspective, and, like, tell me if you were to ask, like, someone older what they would potentially say.
I think LeBron makes both lists.
Okay.
I just think he's going to be on all time, and I think he's going to be on right now just because of the history and the Big Three era, et cetera, against him and the Heat and him and the Cavs even way early on.
And now he's a Laker, so it's even more so.
Yeah. I think Kobe would make it for both as well. I just think it gives a little boost if you're playing the Lakers, and I just think that is ultimately how it is. I think recent fans, not all time. I don't know if there is a figure because it's cheating, and I need to pick a talking head. It's just anybody from the Heat, just any one single Heat player from that team would be like anybody like I'm like in high school right now, or maybe like dipping into my age, would pick somebody from that Heat team, whether it's a Jimmy Butler, whether it's a Caleb Martin, you know what I'm saying? Like somebody from those Heat teams that have played the Celtics in the conference finals 3 out of 4, years and beat them twice.
Can I give you the suggestion for the Heat representative? And it's Riley.
Yeah, Spoelstra. Riley, sure. Riley, Spoelstra, either one of them.
Yeah.
Throw them in there. Think that's perfect. All time, it would probably be Magic Johnson. I think they would probably make the list. And maybe you do like Isaiah Thomas. I'm admittedly not great with the history. That's much more of a Sam question than me. I love recent, and I know recent, but the further back I get, the more embarrassing it gets for me. But I think those two would be pretty good for old Celtics. That Kobe, LeBron, Johnson, Isaiah Thomas. I think that'd be good. And then if I'm picking another recent one, it gets tough because who do they play often? And I think Kobe, LeBron, Pat Riley, sure. But like, it feels like they haven't had enough like losing consistently to this team outside of the Heat and LeBron, both of whom I have covered, right? Like they lost to Kobe a bunch of times. They lost to LeBron a bunch of times. They lost to the Heat a bunch of times recently. But outside of that, like they lost like Steph. Like, I don't think that counts. Like they played them once and they lost in the finals. So like if you want to choose that, like.
So does that inform it? Because like you have to have lost to them because
I think so. Because like I'm not gonna. They've played Embiid a billion times, but he's not a villain. Like he beat him every time. Like in my eyes, at least.
Again, Embiid's on my list, and the Knicks have never lost to Joel Embiid in the playoffs. You know,
I get it 100%, but like he plays like crap against the Celtics. Like he's not a villain. Like he's just not good. He'd get
his number retired in Boston for his contributions to the franchise.
Exactly. They love him. We love him here.
Got it.
Oh, Kyrie. What am I doing? Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Duh. Like look at me. Look at me being a dummy. Yeah. I'm thinking playoffs too much. I got to think in general. Yeah. Kyrie would absolutely be on the list. I mean, if you wanted to go through the list of like quote unquote Celtics killers, right? I think that's a little different than villains because they're not necessarily like hated, but like Chris Middleton, solid defense. Don't like going up against that guy. Ish Smith plays real when he was in the league. Oh yeah. There's a whole list. Caleb Martin, obviously, and like who's another one? Evan Fournier before he was on the team always played well against. But like I think Kyrie, LeBron, Kobe, and then Pat Riley / Eric Spoelstra is the recent one, and then the other one I gave you is good.
Yeah, the embodiment of the Heat. Yeah.
And I might even put Kyrie on the all-time list. People hate that guy in the city.
Well, the way things ended in Boston, and look, I come from it with a unique perspective that season because I thought he was coming into the Knicks. Like I remember when he made those comments right after the Porzingis trade, and it was like, oh, so he's not going to stay in Boston, even though in the preseason he said, and obviously we're both, I'm assuming, both big listeners of Bill Simmons. And I remember the Simmons tweets and the Simmons rants about Kyrie and how miserable everyone in Boston found that season, only to have him go to the most irrelevant franchise in the NBA, which has only become more irrelevant as the Knicks take their best player. They go off tanking for Cooper Flagg and the Liberty take over their building forever. The career choice of Kyrie Irving. And that's why I think we were talking a bit before the pod, the storylines for the finals this year. Again, as much as I don't like that the Mets didn't make it, that the Knicks didn't make it, like I can objectively say we've had some really good storylines in the 4, really the 5, if you want to include the WNBA, like all the major sports storylines that exist between the Celtics going up against Luka and Kyrie. Like even if you want to go to hockey, you got Connor McDavid, who's like the next Gretzky, coming back from 3-0 to take on this Panther team that got to the finals the year before and then lost. And of course, Yankees, Dodgers, and then Mahomes against the 49ers.
Yeah.
We are at a place where the finals have been really good, which is why I don't want to say Adam Silver makes sure that keeps up and we get Knicks Celtics in the conference finals. But if there were a year for you to make sure you have the best possible storylines available to you, well, I guess it doesn't matter now because the TV contract's locked up. So
yeah,
you're set. Oh man, the Knicks are gonna have to win fair and square. Damn.
Yeah, we're getting Magic Cavs in the conference finals. Ugh.
Darn it. No, worse, the Pacers. Like the Pacers will end up there. Although
man.
So try to think, what's the Western Conference? Like, well, OKC might make the finals this year. So that's the funny part is you want to talk about small markets.
At least they got you.
But are people like, as far as stars in the West?
The Kings.
Well, the Kings make the finals. You'll know the NBA is a fair and square sport.
I like the Kings too, but talk about star power. It is not there. Except Sabonis was great in starting five, though. I guess, right? Like, so he was
I guess we'll see. We'll see. Jack, as always, it is good catching up with you. I wish you nothing but the worst on Tuesday night in ring night. I hope you enjoy the ring ceremony and then nothing else about the experience on Tuesday. And look, you did actually tweet at me during the baseball playoffs that you're rooting for the Mets.
We adopted the Mets. The Mets in the playoffs.
And I appreciated it. And I wish I could have reciprocated it better than it's still fuck Boston, but thank you.
I was in an Uber with my roommates when you tweeted that. We were all dying laughing.
I'll be completely honest with you. Thank you, but I hate the city still. I get it. No, it's fine. As the kids would say, I kept it 100. So, Jack, before you get out of here, tell all the fine folks at home where they can find you and all your work this year.
Absolutely. I'm on Twitter at JackSimoneNBA. You can find my written work at hardwoodhoudini.com this year. It's a fan-sided site. That's where all my written content is. And then the How About Them Celtics podcast is there. And you can follow along for game-to-game coverage. I'll be at the Garden this year for plenty of Celtics games. Covering the team.
You're going to travel to New York for all your work this year?
No. I'll be at the Garden, the one with the banners, as Sam would say. The one with the rings.
I'll go with the one that people call the Garden in the world. Again, it's that map of in Boston, they call it the Garden, and then the rest of the country.
Shoes, the Garden. You see those? You see Tatum called his shoes the Garden? Something at the Garden? Tatum new
Wait, so shoes, Tatum has shoes Garden. Called the Garden?
He has Welcome to the Garden is his first shoes. Is his first Tatum 3 styles. Showing love to what he referred to himself as where he plays, the Garden, TD Garden.
He had a rough summer, and I don't want to pile on, but I don't think we would go to Jason Tatum as a trendsetter if we want to fully have the conversation of how people treat and view and look up to one Jason Tatum. So it just doesn't surprise me that something else was called something and he decided to repurpose it as his own.
I see.
Yeah. Anything's possible, Jason. Anything's possible. Thank you for joining me, my friend. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. Again, if you are in the area, we've been plugging it as much as we can. If you're in the area, the New York City area, and want to come down to 42nd Street to T Squared Social, please join us. It is a stone's throw away from Grand Central. We would love to have you there for our watch party, our first watch party of the 24-25 season. I'll be there. John will be there. The whole KFS crew, as many of us possible, will be there. And we'll be watching as the Knicks take on the Boston Celtics on the first game of the regular season. If you dug this episode, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. I'll be back later this week to preview the Knicks home opener against the Indiana Pacers. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Let's go Knicks. And I will speak with you soon.